Gentlemen, this is Dan, and I have Ezra on the fourth video now from Suffolk Mind.
That sounds about right, yes.
You are turning into our mental health guru. Yeah.
I have a ban on the G word at Suffolk Mind. Nobody's allowed to use that word. Yeah.
Good, absolutely.
But you can just this once.
Well, there you go. I think it's because I know you're quite qualified and you talk the talk and walk the walk. So,
I try. Yeah.
And I respect what you say. But anyway, a couple of questions have come up through MANUP. I'm sure you've been in them conversations on videos. This is going on about therapy. And one of the things I see time and time again, it seems to have died off recently, but whatever. Why can't a therapist tell me what to do?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try to answer that but by drawing on two things, really. One is kind of my understanding of the various theories that inform the way that therapists and counselors work, and also my practical experience too. So one thing to stress is that we should always put the person who's coming for therapy, well, I'll just refer to them as the client, which I think most people will be familiar with that jargon, but we should always put the client's autonomy, their control over making decisions about their life, first and foremost. So that's one really good reason to not tell people what to do, because if we're telling people what to do, particularly when they're vulnerable, and when we're vulnerable or distressed about something, we're very susceptible to taking on board other people's messages and to becoming disempowered ourselves. And there are some ethical risks in there. So whatever the outcomes of the therapy are, it should always be something which is agreed between both parties. So the way that I work is that I always be looking to agree a practical goal with the client for what they're going to do following the session, whether that is to increase their physical activity or practice relaxation exercises or do something about their sleep or work on relationship and communication skills. But that needs to come from the client and be in alignment with their needs. So that's the first thing to say. However, there are lots of different competing theories that inform the way that therapists and counselors work. And somebody else, if they were on this call, they might say something completely different to what I'm going to say. I think that the verb to counsel implies that you're giving people advice, but there are some therapists and counselors who are perhaps trained in what's known as a person-centered approach, or sometimes more old-fashioned term is Rogerian counseling, following the work of a psychologist and psychotherapist called Carl Rogers. And they subscribe to the view that in all of us there is something called a self-actualization principle, which guides the person to find the answer that is right for them. And they're the sorts of counselors and therapists where they may sit and listen, they may nod, they may reflect back to you what it is that they've understood about what you've heard. And for some people, having seen the conversations that you're talking about, Dan, where people are talking about their experience of counselling and psychotherapy, they may be thinking, what on earth am I getting out of this? This person's not telling me anything; they're just reflecting back what I've said. But that person, that counsellor or therapist, is likely working from the view that by reflecting back what they've heard, they're providing a mirror, if you like, to allow the client to direct and find their own way and to come to their own realizations about what it is that they need. Yeah. Now, I'm of the view that if you were to analyze the scripts of those counseling sessions, what you would find is that actually those counselors and therapists are being quite directive. They don't realize it. They would claim that they're being very indirect, or they're not directing their clients at all. But there will still be elements of the conversation and things that the therapist stroke counselor says that are quite directive. So for example, if you tell me about an experience that you've had and I say, okay, and how do you feel about that? I'm actually directing your attention to your feelings. That is quite that's quite directive. It sort of may seem a little bit subtle, but it's actually quite directive. Now, the way that I'm trained and the way that I work, I may appear to be quite indirect, because it might be clear as day to me that the person is stuck on focusing their attention. Their attention's locked on an event from the past that they can't possibly change, or a particular viewpoint about their circumstances, which is unhelpful. But I won't tell them that outright. As you know, like people telling you what to do, you know, oh, you should just do X, Y, and Z and everything will be fine, seldom works. So there is a sense in which the client needs to own the answer for themselves. So I might ask them questions which help them to see it from a different perspective. So it might be, you know, so how long is it? A kind of really strong example is where people identify with a particular problem. So they say, I'm depressed. I'm just an anxious person. You know, I'm an alcoholic. And I might reflect back what I've heard, but in such a way as to separate them from the problem. So I might say something like, so when did the depression begin? I'm emphasizing the word there. I wouldn't do that, you know, in real life.
Yeah.
But I'm separating the person from the problem. When did the depression begin? What else was going on at the time? And what was life like when there wasn't any depression in your life? What were you doing differently? And that is, I'm not telling the person what to do, but I'm asking questions that guide their attention towards finding solutions for themselves, so that they can discover it for themselves and own it, and so that they can draw upon whatever previous experiences, knowledge, and skills will help them to better meet their needs.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, if you like, that's the kind of the stage of the therapy where I'm trying to build rapport with somebody and gather information about what's going on for them. It may even involve subtle reframes too. But then once we're at the point where they've said, you know, where we've established that and we've established what the nature of the problem is, and we're then looking to agree a goal from the therapy, it might be that we learn that the person doesn't really know how to manage strong emotions, or they don't know how to organize their sleep, or they don't know how to communicate with their partner or other people in the workplace. Or it could be that they're suffering from trauma. And then in those instances, it might be that I actually need to teach a person skills. And then I am being quite directive. If I'm teaching you how to do 7-11 breathing, then I'm going to have to tell you how to do it, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to be quite directive. So a lot depends upon the context. Now, there's another kind of set of circumstances that may occur more rarely, but nonetheless they do occur, where I definitely do tell people what to do. So I've had clients coming to counselling services where maybe they've come for, you know, the stated reason for coming was because, you know, they're suffering with a bit of anxiety or something of that nature. And then through gathering information, I learned that they're in a relationship with somebody, they live with somebody who is verbally abusive and occasionally physically abusive with them. And they're clearly very distressed and they haven't told anybody about it before. And I have said to people before, is there somewhere you can go that isn't home tonight? And you know, usually I'll probably already know a little bit, like, you know, they can go back to their parents or whatever it is to another. If you went back to your parents now, is there somewhere where you can stay? Would they understand? Yes. And would you feel safe there? Yes. And have you been in contact with any agencies that support people with these sorts of issues? And if they say no, then I'll give them the information. And some counsellors and therapists might feel that that's unethical for me to tell a person what to do. But I would rather that the risk of me not doing that when I make that call is that they may go home and they're in a situation where their life is at risk. And I don't want to read about them in the newspaper, or receive an update from our services that so and so you were seeing is in hospital, or has been killed by their partner. So I have done that in the past. And again, some counselors and therapists might think that that I'm telling that it's wrong to tell the client what to do, but I think context is everything. It depends upon the situation.
Well, I think because that's safeguard, because I've done training with safeguarding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's safeguarding, and I think so. I go off on one when it's about safeguarding, but safeguarding overrules absolutely everything in my personal opinion.
Absolutely. So you also asked about, I think your other question that was to do with why it is that therapy can sometimes take a long period of time, or why the results don't come quickly.
Because the main thing is, especially, maybe it's because it's a male audience, or 99% of it is a male audience, but the main thing is I've tried therapy. Oh, how did you get on? Oh shit. Was it what? And it's like, well, how long did you do it for? 2 weeks. And actually, most of them is just, they did it once. And I do remember when I joined my therapist, the first day I was saying to the missus, I was like, I'm not sure. I feel like I just paid money for him to know my name and a few bits and bobs. But I stayed with it, and that's when I didn't notice stuff with myself. Other people were saying, you seem a bit more, you're dealing with stuff a little bit better. And that's when I was like, actually, maybe there is something with that. But anyway, so I'm talking for you, so I apologize.
No, that's fine. So again, I'm trained as a human givens therapist. So we by and large work as brief solution focused therapists, and I would expect to see positive changes quite quickly. Sometimes, on rare occasions, it's just one session. Often that's because a person has come my way because they've heard about something called the rewind technique that human givens therapists are trained to use to treat traumas and phobias. And I might, if I'm able to establish rapport and gather really concrete information about what the traumatic event was, and if it's quite isolated, like it's a one-off event, and I'm able to, and they respond well to guided imagery, which is sometimes called visualization. It's a technique where we're using people's imagination to kind of get them into a very relaxed state. And it's an essential component of the rewind technique. Where we're able to do that in the first session, you can see very quick results.
Yeah.
But it can also be the case that, or if somebody's suffering with some mild to moderate depression, and they've got lots and lots of resources, or anxiety even, they've got lots and lots of resources. So they've got a supportive relationship, they've got work that they like, and that meets their needs, gives them meaning and purpose, control and autonomy. They feel valued and so on. And they've got a lot of knowledge and skills and life experience. And it's likely that the results are going to take effect more quickly, because they've already got a lot of resources that you need to be able to draw upon to meet your needs. But if somebody's got, if somebody's been exposed to sort of traumatic events in their childhood or adolescence, and they've developed lots of unhealthy coping strategies, and you might, and they're missing supportive relationships, perhaps they're not very confident around relationships, or they're living in a rurally isolated location, or for that matter, they're living in an urban environment, a busy town, but they still feel isolated, because that's just as likely. Then you might need to treat the trauma. You might need to teach them alternative coping skills. You might need to begin to kind of build their motivation to make connection with other people. They might need to learn relationship skills. They might need to learn relaxation skills. They might need to learn job seeking skills. They might need to learn that they have needs in the first place. So there's a lot more to learn. Or it could be that the cause of somebody's stress or anxiety is that they're in a workplace where there's bullying going on, but they're finding they're lacking confidence to apply for jobs and to get through job interviews. If you can't change the work environment, then you need to get the person, or whatever the environment is, if it's stopping them getting their needs met, you need to support them to get into a healthier environment. And that can take time. If people, need to develop other skills in the first place, and they're kind of, managing the stresses and the anxieties, and other issues come along as well. So it all depends upon the context.
Yeah.
Some some therapy will, they'll, again, other counselors and therapists, if they're watching this, may come from a different starting point. They may have a different kind of philosophical outlook on what the purpose of counseling and psychotherapy is. They may see it as a long-term kind of voyage of self-discovery or something of that nature. I don't. You can have insights about yourself, but my view is that self-development or kind of spiritual practices, or if you're into that kind of a thing, that's like a lifelong thing that you get from everyday life experiences, reflecting on what happened to you that day. The way that I'm trained to work is just to enable a person to better meet their needs in the present and kind of lift any distress or any depression or anxiety or the symptoms of trauma or whatever it is, whatever's a barrier to enabling a person to get their needs met so those symptoms disappear. I'm working on that, and then hopefully they're better able to kind of move on with their lives, and when challenges do arise, which inevitably they will do, they have the coping skills to be able to manage those and resolve them for themselves without having to fall back on people like me. Although sometimes they might come back for a session or two if they're a bit stuck with something, and they're still working to move on.
Yeah. So how many people lie? Just out of interest.
How many people lie?
How many? I don't want to say lie. It's like you with the Suffolk Mind.
Oh, we lie to ourselves all day, Dan. So what is your question? How many people that aren't kind of completely open or upfront about what the issues are when they first come to see you?
Which can not indirectly, very much directly, slow down the progress, slow down you doing your job, isn't it? Surely. Or am I just
well no, it's an interesting question. It is left field, but that's okay. So it can certainly be the case that a person can come to you with one if they, in their notes or whatever, when they speak to one of our coordinators, such and such a person has been struggling with anxiety, and it's from this particular event, and they want to come and see you about it. And it can be that once they get through the door, you say, so I understand, you'd like to do something about X problem, but do you want to tell me a bit more about it? And then the lid comes off and they tell you about a whole load of other things that they weren't prepared to disclose to somebody on the telephone. Or it could be that you work on a particular issue and you sort of sense that there are some other issues, there are some other problems, otherwise the symptoms wouldn't be as severe as they are, but they're not yet ready to tell you about it. So I don't push them on that. I just work on what it is that they've told me they want to work on. So going back to our starting point about counselors and therapists not telling you what to do. Why don't they do that? Why don't they just tell you? It's because I'm working with what you've said you want to work on, and you've got control over that. That's for you to decide. Yeah. If at a later date you're like, well, actually, now that we've done that and I've seen some improvements, there's some other things I want to talk about.
Okay.
And then they may disclose, but that's up to them. And it's also the same with that. This is a bit of jargon, which I'll explain. Sometimes a problem there can be secondary gain from it. So what I mean by that is that while the problem may have arisen because the person's needs are poorly met. So let's say somebody is in an abusive, harmful relationship, and their need for security is not met. They don't feel safe at home. They're constantly worried about, when their partner's going to explode or behave in whatever way towards them again. But they're not ready to leave the house or leave the relationship. And that could be because they want to be there for their children. They don't want to put their children through a particular situation, or they've never been on their own before, and they don't feel that they have the confidence to kind of cope and survive. Perhaps the abusive partner has convinced them that they couldn't manage on their own. Mm-hmm. So there's a conflict between the need to feel safe and have control over your life, and then, and you're not feeling that you're competent enough, or that anybody will value you again if you leave and go it alone. I once knew of a case where somebody didn't want to move on because they didn't want to leave the garden, where there was a plant in the garden. Well, and that might at first that seems like, well, that's crazy. Like, why would somebody want to stay? There must be some other reason. And the reason was that plant was the one thing that they'd had control over in the house. They'd nurtured it from seed to plant. They'd given it attention. It had given them a focus. It helped them to cope. It gave them a source of meaning and purpose, and enabled them to, try and cope and survive in a toxic, abusive relationship. So they had to be helped to understand that they could dig the plant up and take it with them in order to. And you think, well, why couldn't they see that for themselves? But when any of us are in the grip of strong emotional arousal, we very often can't see the wood for the trees. And that's when kind of reflective listening skills and helping people to, just giving people space to kind of talk about things and maybe asking some questions that shift their perspective, that empowers and enables the client to see how they could do things differently.
That was gold. I've never heard that before. Well, it's just, I feel like there needs to be a sequel to that. But it clearly shows, doesn't it, is why we shouldn't judge people on how they're seeing or feeling their life is going at that present in time. I think it's just, even though it sounds absolutely, the second you said someone didn't want to move because of a plant, automatically I'm thinking, well, just dig the plant up.
Yeah.
But actually, in their eyes, that plant is their world, and all it will take is 10 minutes more to listen.
Well, Dan, you can see that because you're not in that situation, right? So you're almost like you're at one remove. Sometimes in psychology we call that the observing self. It's that part of us that's able to observe ourselves at one remove a bit more objectively. But when you're in the grip of strong emotional arousal, being able to step back and observe things and see a different way of doing things and say, oh, I could just dig the plant up and take it with me, that's nigh on impossible. It would take a very mature, evolved, developed person to be able to stay calm and reflective in all, when their needs are not met, when they're under huge amounts of pressure. And counseling and psychotherapy can provide a space for people to kind of talk about things and learn to observe their problems at one remove. That you might need to do more than that. Just talking about trauma alone is unlikely to resolve it. You would need specific skills and techniques to be able to unhook the emotion from the traumatic memories and allow a person to be able to observe them as if they were just things that happened in the past and no longer affect them in the present. So it's not, there's not a black and white answer to our starting question. Why is it that counselors don't tell us what to do? But I hope that I've been able to provide some context which explains.
Well, you have. You kind of see it through the therapist's eyes up to a point. And I don't know why my camera's flickering, so I do apologise on that. But it's just a stupid thing. So hopefully, it's just given some people a bit of an insight that it's not just black and white.
Absolutely.
And it really is a case by case. But you at Suffolk Mind, you do counselling as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I spend. I mean, my role is as head of education involves developing training courses and coaching a training team and sort of informing our organizational approach. But I also keep my hand in and spend time working in our counseling services too, as a number of us do, so that we're kind of walking our talk.
Yeah, good. I highly recommend therapy. I never used it, but I can highly recommend therapy. And you charge as well, I presume you have to.
It's a sliding, we do, but it's a sliding scale for people who are on low income so that we can make it affordable for them. So it depends upon, and sometimes we have funded places for people who are affected by particular issues at any given time. If I had one kind of final piece of advice for people that are coming to see counsellors and therapists, whether it's at Suffolk Mind or elsewhere, kind of in your initial session, the therapist or counsellor should give you the opportunity to ask questions, and you should ask them, what should I expect? Is there a particular way that you work? And then it'll give you an opportunity to say, and you might just outright ask them, say, if I wanted advice on something, would you do that or would you not? And then you're in a better position to make a decision about whether that counsellor or therapist and their approach is right for you.
No, absolutely. Well, what I'll do, if you can send me the links, whatever, I'll do the whole taggy stuff and stuff. And yeah, again, I know I've had comments before. It's like, well, shouldn't have to pay for it. Yeah, I'm going to be quite hard on this one because I've been there. You've got two choices. You can go to the NHS and wait for 18 months, at least 18 months, 2 years, or you're going to have to pay for it. It really, that's a situation. It's a horrible situation, but it is what it is. But I do like the idea of your sliding scale, which I'm not going to pin you down on that one, but I like the idea of that. So I'll do the whole taggy stuff and that stuff. So
thank you.
I think our work here is done.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Let me just do that thingy, but you